So hey guys, today we're back working on this 84 944 and we're going to be inspecting the clutch and doing a few more odds and ends. So let's get started. Alright guys, we're out here working on this silver 944 again. Today I was up underneath it investigating some drive line slack. Whenever I let off the gas, it seems like the car kind of bucks back and then has to catch again whenever I accelerate. So what I did was I got the car up in the air here and put it neutral. Then I removed the cover where the torque tube coupler is, and I could turn the shaft a little bit too easily and shouldn't move it all if the clutch is good. So I'm not sure if this car has the original rubber centered clutch, and the owner doesn't seem to know either. He has no paperwork on it, so we're going to try and dig in this week and see what's going on with the clutch. It could be bad springs on it, or it could be the original rubber centered clutch has deteriorated. So aside from that, we also got some speakers in that we're going to be putting in the back. So if you've ever wondered how to install rear speakers, I'm going to be showing you how to do that. And then here I have an order from Pelican Parts. I thought I'd go ahead and open it up. Alright, let's see what we got here. Got a new oxygen sensor here. This one on this car has failed. And I also have some new trunk lock seals. As you can see, this one here is missing, and in fact there's a few of them missing on several of these cars out here, and I just went ahead and ordered a big bundle of them. And then I picked up some Omega clips for the wiring harness under the hood, so that should tidy everything up nicely. And over here we have a new headlight bucket. The owner says that he was riding down the road and his got whacked and broken, and it's dented here, and this part here is broken, so he picked this up on Craigslist, and I'll be installing this as well. And then over here in this bag here we have all new wiring and such for the new speakers. Now I'm going to install on these trunk lock seals. And there you have it. While these are not easy to install, they are definitely worth it. So here's my new Omega clip installed. Alright guys, we're trying to get in there to that clutch. Have James under here unbolting the headers. And he's going to drop the exhaust. We already have the transmission removed over here. So I already got the transmission and the exhaust out last night. Today we're working on removing the torque tube, getting it slid back. You can see the shaft here, and I can turn it, so that's telling me that there is something not right with that clutch there. And torque tube looks to be in excellent shape. There's not a speck of rust on it. So alright, while he's down there removing the torque tube, I thought I would go ahead and install the rear speakers. You can see them here. And to do this, I'm going to be removing the rear window so that way I don't tear any of the interior fabric up. So I have the window pushed out a little bit, as you can see here. And I started at this upper corner here and just pulled the rubber back. And from here, I'm just going to gently work my way around the window. Pull it out. So once you get the window pushed out like that, I just ran my hand down like that and the window came right out. You do want to be careful on this side. You want to take your fingers and pull up, because the rubber is wrapped around a little metal lip there. And once you do that, your window will come out just like that. So now that the window is out of the way, you can see that the vinyl from this trim piece is wrapped around the body there. So I don't want to rip any of this. I don't want to cut any of it. So what I'm going to do, just gently lift it up like that. So when I go to remove this panel, Nothing gets torn or damaged. It's alright, I now have the panel sitting out like this, and you need to be careful when removing all this from around the window here because they are glued to each other. This part here is glued to the headliner, and the headliner tears like wet tissue, so you've got to be very, very careful. And you can see here that this here is also glued to the panel, so I've just left it. And up here it's glued to the headliner, so again I've just left it. So here's a look at the speaker that you'll see once you remove the panel. There's 4 screws holding it in. So now I have the speaker out and the screen glued back on there. And that's going to prevent you from seeing the speaker when it's installed. Back here I've been working on soldering some spade terminals to the wiring here. I'm going to be removing the fader switch, so I'm just going to run all new wiring. So over on this side I also have the panel off, and you can see the speaker and the screen down in there. I'm going to try and get that. That's how the other one was. They just fall off and go down in there. So I'm going to glue this one back on and we'll get that speaker out of there. Alright, I've got the speaker in on this side and the screen glued back on as well. Alright, I now have the driver's side panel put back on, and you can see that that screen covers all that chrome that's on the speaker. So alright, now that I have the panels back on, I'm going to be installing the rear windows, and the easiest way to do this is to turn them over, and you're going to see a groove here. You're going to need some wire or a really long string, and you're just going to run it around this lip here like that. Alright, so I've started installing the passenger window here, and something I thought I'd point out was that removing this metal piece that goes around the outside there will not make it easier to put the window in, and actually it's harder to put this piece back on once the window's on. So it's best to do it all together. And inside here you can see how this looks here, and if I can get this light here, I'll show you what I'm doing. I'm just taking this wire here and just pulling it out, and as it pulls it around, it installs the window. Alright, the new rear speakers are in and everything looks great. So I have the torque tube slid back now, and I have a clutch alignment tool here, and what I'm going to be doing is listening for any noise coming from the clutch. Now if you have a good clutch, you shouldn't be able to turn this at all, and not only can I turn it, but it turns easily, and you can also hear this clacking here. So if I had to guess, this is most likely a rubber center clutch that is blown. And when we were removing the coupler, you could tell that nobody had ever been into this before. There was still paint on the bolts, so I'm thinking this is the original clutch. I'm interested to see what this clutch disc looks like. How tore up is that rubber in there? Oh, you get the disc with you there. So alright, here's a better look at the clutch that we removed last night. You can see a giant chunk of rubber missing here, and also here. It's completely split there. So when I was using the alignment tool to turn it, this is what I was doing there. You can see that it took until then to catch on these tabs for the car to move, and whenever you let off the gas and you started coasting, it would just jerk the car because it would no longer have contact with these tabs, and that was the cause of all the slack in the drive line. And I've ordered a new clutch and it's on the way. So something I noticed when I was driving this car was that the horn pad sat down like that and would flop around a little bit when you'd hit a bump. So I decided to take the horn pad off and found that this little clip here was broken. So I've got another one here that I'm going to be putting in. That ought to do it. So now the horn pad is back on and working great. It has definitely improved the look of this interior. So alright, now that I have the speakers in and I have the panels back on, I need to run the wiring. So the first thing I've done here is remove the radio. I don't have keys to a Pioneer radio, so what I did was I went over and pulled a spare Pioneer off the shelf that I have laying around, and I looked at how they clipped into the sleeve, and it appeared that all you need was something thin. So I just used my Blaupunkt keys, slid it back in there, and the radio came right out. Alright, and as simple as that, I now have the radio out. Now I was hoping to find the factory harness here so that way I could see if that adapter from Crutchfield works with the early cars, but no such luck. Although this does look like it was installed nicely. Perhaps someone before had cut it out and then they just had to go this way. So anyway, what I'm going to be doing here is running all new wiring from the speakers to the head unit and deleting this fader switch here because the owner says that the radio just doesn't seem to get loud and he thinks this is the culprit. Now I haven't tried to listen to the radio or anything, but I'm going to go ahead and do it the way that he wants because, you know, it's simple enough. So alright, I have the stereo unplugged now, and what we have going on here is that the front two channels run to the factory wiring harness that goes to this fader, and then it's split up and it goes to all four speakers. So it's no wonder that the owner complained that the stereo didn't get very loud because only the front two channels are working to power four speakers. And if you'll look here, you can see that the rear speakers are just taped up. So we're going to get rid of this fader switch altogether, and we're going to do that by running all new wire from the speakers in the rear to the head unit right here in these wires. So alright, the first thing I want to do before I try and hook up the speakers is just get rid of this tangled mess. As you know, there's not a lot of room behind these radios, and like this is just a big wad of tangled wires. If you pull on one, it brings 5 of them with it. As you can see, they're just wrapped around each other. And these things aren't bad, but it could look so much better. So that's what I'm going to do before I even try and go. Alright, I'm trying to straighten up some of this wiring. I got all these cut off here, and I'm going to try and make this look a lot nicer. Here's what the switch looks like when it's removed. Now I will be putting it back in, but it's not going to do anything because I'm actually going to go ahead and remove all the wiring for it, and even run new wiring to the front speakers because this is just a huge mess here. And you can see someone has used electrical tape here, and electrical tape gets hot and turns sticky, and there is an alternative you can use if you really need to wrap something. And I only use this when I have to because I really like the way that braided nylon looks. But if you do want to wrap something, then this is the stuff to do it with. This will only adhere to itself, and it doesn't turn sticky or anything because it doesn't really have any adhesive on it. You just stretch it out and wrap it up, and then you can cut it off later on. So alright, I have all that electrical tape off now, and we can get a better look at how the factory wired this thing. Now here we have the wires that came from the original head unit, and they ran down here, and then you can see where they connected the grounds together, and then those ran to the rear speakers, and then you had 2 wires come up here to the fader switch, and then 4 wires left. And I was actually shaking this thing. You can hear something rattling around in there, so there's no telling if this thing was even working anymore. So I'm just going to remove all this wiring and clean it up, and the owner will have all new wiring running to the speakers and none of this hodgepodge here. So I now have the door speaker out and the wiring here. I'm going to be taping the new wiring to it and pulling it through like I am the rear speaker wiring. So alright, I've been working on getting this all cleaned up. Here is the plug from the car. Here is the wiring harness that supplies power from the car, and I went ahead and ran all new speaker wiring to all 4 speakers, and now I'm ready to solder all this together. So I was going through the wiring and I noticed that the illumination wire was not connected to anything. There is no place to connect it on this car, so it was just taped up with the rear speaker wiring, and I thought I would make it work. Like me, the owner doesn't use the ashtray, and he actually has a cup holder that goes in here, so what I did was I connected it to the ashtray bulb like I did in my car, and I now have a wire running over to it, so I'm going to connect it there. So alright, I now have the power cables connected, and this is how it turned out. I've got some nylon sleeving over it, and I just finished soldering the speaker wiring together, and it looks great. Now if you're wondering what this blue tape is, this is how I kept track of which wire went to which speaker. Now every time I tried to move it around, the ink would wear off where I'd marked it, so what I did was I came up with a code which basically tells me whether or not the speaker is left or right. This one here you can see is pointing to the right, so this would be a right rear with a triangle on it, so this is right rear, and this one here would be the left rear, and then if it had a square then it was a front speaker, so here we have the left front and the right front. Now I can remove all that since everything's hooked up and put my nylon sleeving on, and there you have it. So alright, when I ran the new speaker wire through here, I had to remove this trim piece and pull the carpet back, and it's glued in 2 spots, so I wanted to make sure that I glued it back. I used this Gorilla Glue here. It looks to be about the same color as the factory glue, and then I just shoved this paper down here to hold the carpet in place until it dried. And it's only been drying about 5 minutes, and so far it seems to be doing a great job. So I now have the radio all hooked up, so let's test it out. You should be able to hear that now. Also, let's test the dimmer. Excellent. So the only thing I need to do now is push the radio into its sleeve. And lock it into place. Alright, I now have the stereo back in, and I also set the EQ up so we can get a better idea of what the sound quality will be. So if you have an early car and you have any switch covers that are loose like this one here, you can easily fix it by taking a lighter and just running it a few times back and forth just to get it warm. Don't want to apply too much heat, and then pushing the center section of the clip back out again, and then do the same on the other side, and that'll fix it. You can see here I've already fixed this one here, and it's much harder to push out. Now what happens is, as the car gets hot, these clips just take the shape of this hole here, but as I mentioned, you can just heat them up and they'll be good to go again, like brand new. So hey guys, today I'm going to be building a headlight harness for this car, and you can see I've got everything laid out here. And the reason why I'm doing that is because even though the owner has upgraded to H4 bulbs, they're still really dim. I checked the voltage and he's only getting around 11 volts with the engine running. So we need to get those up. We need to get it up to at least 13.5 volts for these lights to be bright enough. So today I'm going to be showing you how to build one of these yourself, so that way you can get bright headlights as well. So alright, everything that you see here was pretty much sourced locally. The only thing that I had to order was the nylon braided sleeve. So all these relays and plugs you can pick up at your local auto parts store if you're planning to build something like this. So alright, I thought I would show you some of the items that I have here. First of all, we have one of the relay sockets, and it comes with an extra wire, and we don't need that since we are only going to be using the RL44 and not the RL45. So that's what that's going to look like. And we're going to need two, since this one, for instance, would be used for low beams. We would also need a relay for high beams. So I have another set here. Next we have some sockets for the bulbs. So rather than trying to cut up the factory harness or anything like that, they do sell these in stores, and I don't believe they're very expensive, maybe $2 or $3. So you can just remove the terminals from these and put your own wiring in, and it will look very nice. Then we have the wiring. The other wiring harnesses that I've seen use two wires that run independently to the relays. Now, since I'm using one big 8-gauge wire to run to the relays, instead of having two fuses on that line, I've opted for just one, and I think it looks a little bit cleaner and works well for my setup. And you can see that I have the fuse here, and it just goes in like this. And then it's protected from the elements. This is the second harness that I've built, and both times I've done this. And like I said, rather than having two fuses, I thought it was just better to run one. It's alright, now that you've seen what I'm working with, the next step here is to measure everything, get it cut, and then solder all the wires together. I'm going to be covering the wires that are soldered with some marine grade heat shrink here. And then the wires themselves will be covered in braided nylon sleeving. So in the end, this should look really nice. So as you can see, he's upgraded to the E-codes that came on the European cars. And I have the cover off so you can see that the wiring harness plugs directly into a 9003 bulb. Basically, I'm just going to unplug that and zip tie it out of the way, then make my own plug to plug in there. If you're wondering what the difference is between the E-codes and the DOT sealed beam, I'll try and go into that. So I thought I would go over some of the differences between the E-code bulbs and the sealed beam DOT bulbs. So I thought I would go over some of the differences between the E-code bulbs and the DOT sealed beam bulbs. Now, for starters, they both plug into the exact same socket. And they both have 60-watt high beams, but that's about all they have in common. This one here is a Sylvania 9003 bulb, and it is 60-watt high beam and 55-watt low beam. And if you're thinking this looks more like a modern car's bulb, then you'd be correct. And if you've ever looked inside a modern car's headlight, you may have noticed that there's usually a metal cover over it. And what that does is it helps keep the low beam light out of oncoming traffic's eyes. And that's why you can run a 55-watt low beam with these housings. However, these sealed beam housings don't have anything like that, and they are 35-watt low beam, and that's about as bright as you can get them. So if you're looking to upgrade your lights, you got to keep in mind that in some areas you can't run E-codes because they're not DOT approved. But if you can, it would be upgrading to a more modern bulb. And there's a few other differences, like the flat face and that cover also helps keep most of the light on the road, whereas with these DOT lights, they're known for just scattering light everywhere up in the trees and things like that. So it is something to consider. I just tried to hit the high points here, but I hope that pretty much covers everything. So as I said before, basically what I'm going to be doing is unplugging the stock harness and just zip tying it out of the way. And then I'm going to take my new harness here and that's what's going to plug into the light. So basically this is going to replace the factory harness altogether, and I even tried to keep the colors the same. Now I did have to swap over to black here, but I don't think it's going to be a big deal. And it's going to be just as easy to change the bulb as it was before, and I've used marine grade heat shrink here to keep any water from getting down in there. So alright guys, I got most of this put together last night. Here are my headlight sockets, and they're going to run to the relays here. I'm going to be connecting those in just a short while, and this is what I'm going to plug into the existing headlight sockets on one headlight to tell the relays to turn the power on. And this here comes from the alternator, is fused, and then goes to the relays, and this here is going to go and send power directly from the alternator to the headlights. So I'm wanting to get the most power to the relays, so what I've done here is used an 8-gauge wire and a massive fuse, and here I'm going to be soldering this to this 8-gauge wire, and as you know, it can be rather difficult to solder large gauge wire like this, and I'll show you a trick. I can get this all on here without too many strands trying to pull apart. There you go. So I have my heat shrink on down here already, and what I'm going to do here is actually use a torch I'm going to be heating this up here and then putting the solder up here, and the solder is just going to heat up and run down inside there. Hopefully you can see that. And so here's what the finished product looks like. So here's the rough placement of the fuse. I'm going to set it here where it's easily accessible, and then this wire here is going to connect to the back of the alternator like that, and then I'm going to mount this to this hose, and then the wire will continue to this side where it will supply power to the relay. So I'm going to do the negative now, and I'm going to do it similarly to how I did the connector that comes off the alternator. And instead of having one 8-gauge wire, I've actually got 4 wires here put together, but I'm going to solder them with the blowtorch just as I did the 8-gauge wire. Alright, here's the ground now that I finished it, and if you're wondering why I used 4 wires here instead of the one large wire like I did here, it's because this needs to send power through the relays where this is directly wired. And for the most part, these wires here are only controlling the relay, allowing it to switch on and off and serve no other purpose. So there's no real reason to have this huge wire going to it when it's just completely unnecessary. Alright guys, I'm now finished with the harness, and I thought I would take you through everything that I have so far before I attach the relays. This here is going to connect to the alternator. It's then fused, and then these 2 red wires are going to connect to terminal 87. This is going to supply the power to the headlights, so when the relay is activated, once you have contact, it's going to send power to the headlights. Next I have this harness, and you're going to connect this into the factory bulb sockets, the yellow where the yellow wire is and the white where the white wire is. And then these are going to connect to terminal 86. So you would connect them like that there. And what that's going to do is activate the relay whenever you turn the headlights on. And then this is going to send power to the headlights. And finally, we have this harness here. This is our ground, and what this is going to do is supply a ground feed, so that way when you turn on the headlights, it can activate the relay. And this here is the wires that run to the headlights. So basically what's going to happen when the relay closes is it's going to connect these like that, and your headlights are going to connect to terminal 30, which is this one down at the bottom, and then your negative is going to connect to terminal 85, which is this one right here. And then of course we have the headlight sockets, and we have our ground. So, alright, since all these wires are going to connect to relays, what I'm going to do is take this piece of heat shrink here and have it hold the wires to help keep everything together a little bit better. I'm just going to slide that over there like that there. And now I'm going to try and get everything lined up again and start connecting everything to the relays here. Alright, I'm not actually going to heat this up because I'm not going to heat this up right now because I still need to adjust everything and move the wires around. So I'm going to wait until I get all of these plugged into their appropriate sockets here. And one thing I like to do is take these and snap them together like that, and that's going to keep them a little more organized. So alright, I now have my wires plugged in and the heat shrink holding everything together. Everything looks nice and neat, so the only thing left to do is install the relays. So this is what the harness looks like 100% completed. Next time I'm going to be installing it and testing it out, but I need to get the clutch in there first. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.